Great, thank you. Welcome everyone, very happy to be here. We wanted to start off with a little bit of a backgrounder on the 6Ps eCommerce intelligence framework. As all of us in this room know, finding growth in brick and mortar is becoming more and more challenging. Increasingly, it is online, and even if it's in the store, it's being driven by mobile, it's being driven by that omni-channel shopper with having access and being surrounded by access to e-commerce, whether they're in store or online or on the go. And the big question and what brings us all here today is how do we drive e-commerce growth? How do we drive it faster? There's a fundamental reason why e-commerce is so hard. There's a lot of people who will come from a certain background and be asked, whether it's digital, whether it's alternative channels in a sales channel, and be asked to take on e-commerce. And they find that the traditional rules of brick and mortar don't apply. And there's a fundamental question of why. I came across this cartoon recently. I believe it might have even been Ollie who shared it initially on LinkedIn. And the idea is that in brick and mortar, we're very familiar with how to push inventory out to stores, whether it's displays, pallets, we put in-store promotions, and we would count on the shopper to come across those displays, come across those promotions in store, and find the product. We push it out, we make our number, and everybody's happy. The problem in digital, the problem online and e-commerce is that it's much more of a pull environment. You have to pull the shopper to your product listings. She's not going to find that listing on her own. It has to come up whether it's in search, whether it's in menu, whether it's saved lists, eventually get into their subscriptions. And so, you know, this very nicely displays that contrast where rather than just pushing product to shelf and buying it because it's the loudest, they're actually on the phone, they're no longer paying attention to that. And so how do you get that in front of them? And what that fundamentally means is that e-commerce is shopped one item at a time. Even if it's full basket, even if it's a saved list, even if it's a subscription, at some point that product detail page is what made all the difference. That's what pulled the shopper in, that's what caused them to consider the product and ultimately convert, whether it was online or off. It's true of full basket, it's true of spear phishing. The other truism here of e-commerce is that, as all of us probably know, at some point you've all probably gotten either the email or the shadow in your office doorway saying, I was just on blank.com, I saw our premier product and the image was wrong, or I couldn't find it, or our competitors are searched higher than us. Why is that? And the reality is that e-commerce is the easiest store check to do. So you might go into a local Tesco, you might visit 2 or 3 locations in a given period of time, but e-commerce you can check all sites in a matter of minutes just visually. And the question is often asked, you know, why aren't we performing better? The bigger challenge becomes it's often the question that begets many more questions. It's just the tip of the iceberg. You ask one question and it uncovers a whole lot more issues underneath it. How did the product originally get set up? How was the title determined? Where did it come from? Who set it up? Why is the ratings and reviews such as they are, and so on. So what we found over time was that while we have a great solution in Clavis, and we're very proud of it, it's helpful to have some kind of a framework to tee up how to understand those insights and how to understand the digital shelf and how to understand a way to measure it. In the bricks and mortar world, again, where I come from and a lot of us originally come from, we would measure the 4 Ps, the traditional marketing 4 Ps, product, place, price, and promotion. And to articulate this, I've just drawn a bit of a contrast. What are the key differentiators from brick and mortar to e-commerce across each of the Ps? So in product, we set the assortment in brick and mortar, we set the planogram maybe twice a year, and we have a certain amount of influence over that. We have our certain best practices and where we want to be on the 4-foot shelf. In e-commerce, it's about tracking availability, keeping your products in stock, and having a specialized assortment as well. And as we all know, it can be a lot harder to stay in stock online than in the physical store because it's a much leaner, more just-in-time type of inventory model. In the world of placement, again, we're focused on distribution and where we are on the physical shelf. Online, you have a lot more opportunity for cross-category listing, to get into lists, to get into search, get into subscriptions. In the world of price, we're used to, in the brick and mortar world, where it's a relatively static environment. The retailer, of course, drives that and ultimately determines pricing. Online, it gets a little bit more difficult. There's dynamic pricing, there's a lot of price matching happening, there's a lot of real-time activity happening, and that can create a lot more questions about what's driving these various dynamics online. And finally, in promotion, deals and displays, as mentioned, online we have digital media, we have retail media, we have paid search. There's a couple other elements, though, because e-commerce is trickier. that we have to add. We have two more P's that we bring to the mix here: perfect page and performance. By perfect page, this is really interesting. Why is content so hard for us? It's because in the past we always let the brand folks worry about the packaging. They made sure that the packaging popped on shelf, that you could read the title, that the description, instructions, everything was on the package. Salespeople didn't have to worry about that. Just get the product out to shelf, and hopefully marketing did their job and made the packaging look great. The challenge and the opportunity online is that e-commerce practitioners are now responsible for getting the equivalent of the package up onto the product detail pages. And the opportunity there is it's an empty canvas, and there's a lot more real estate than there is with the physical product. Historically, we are stuck with just the content on the package itself, but increasingly, we have a lot of manufacturers have been able to sort of break those bonds and be able to bring a lot more rich content, be able to make the titles richer, more search optimized, bring more images, bring video, and so on. We also put ratings and reviews here because at the end of the day, while we all know that reviews are critical to listening to the voice of the shopper, it's also part of optimizing the page. If for those retailers who are capable of having reviews, if you don't have a critical number, if you're not well rated, it's going to affect your search results, it's going to affect your consideration and conversion. So at the end of the day, having a strong reviews presence in terms of quantity and quality is important to that overall perfect page optimization. And finally, under performance, in the, again, brick and mortar world, it's primarily sales and share. There's a couple reasons why, yes, we have sales and share for e-commerce, and increasingly there's more and more estimations available on the share front. But there's a number of reasons why share of search is always a better proxy. The original market share metric was designed around a fixed shelf, a fixed set of items. There's 100 items on a shelf, and you have a certain share of revenue of the 100 items on the shelf. In e-commerce, a lot of retailers have a concept of the endless aisle, where there's an increasingly large number of products. It's a dynamic assortment. We know that at any given day, there's products coming in and moving off the site. And so that traditional share metric becomes a little bit trickier, not to mention that it's a little bit misleading in terms of it's only a small percentage of the actual impact we're having. So if e-commerce is 5% or 10% of your business, you're probably having more like 50 or 60% impact on 50 to 60% of all of your company's sales because of that fluid process that the shopper follows. So to only look at market share for online can be misleading towards your overall contribution towards the conversion and the success of the company. So share of search is a really great proxy for that. And it helps you understand how you're performing, whether it's using category keywords, how you show up in menu, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, those search algorithms almost always factor in key things like actual sales velocity, ratings and reviews, and optimization around keywords. So the sum total of the efforts that we all make to optimize product listings will often show up in share of search on category key terms. Even if lists are important, even if subscriptions are important to your business, again, at some point that initial discovery trip happened and search was a critical part of whether or not the product was discovered. So for that reason, we put together Clavis 6Ps eCommerce Intelligence. And just before I take this one step further, again, this came from listening to literally thousands of users. And we have that benefit, that network effect, if you will now, of having well over 60 manufacturers on the Clavis platform, hundreds of instances, thousands of users around the world, and sitting in focus groups, sitting in our customer advisory boards, listening to users and saying, the solution is great, the product is great. I need something that makes it even easier to onboard my teams. I need an easier framework on how all of this hangs together, rather than 8 or 10 different metrics. And so we adapted the 4Ps model to the 6Ps eCommerce Intelligence model, and here's how it works. There are 5 Ps that are within the control of the manufacturer, or at least can be directly influenced: product, place, price, promotion, and perfect page. And what I mean by that is, as you look around the clock here, you have the opportunity to work with the retailer on placement. You certainly have control over what content you're sending to the retailer. While retailers, of course, determine price, there's a certain cost of goods that you're selling to the retailers for, and there's certain aspects of promotion, of course, that you can directly influence, and of course the product itself, what assortment you're setting up on shelf. All of that drives the 6th P, which is performance. We have this cool gear animation just to kind of show how it all works together. And that 6th P is not only sales and share, but search as well. And I'm going to just go right quick here to the 2 big questions we get on this framework. One is, Why is ratings and reviews under perfect page? Shouldn't it be something like perception? Shouldn't it be something like voice of customer? And as I mentioned, we see ratings and reviews fundamentally about optimizing the page. And so while it is important to understand what the shopper's saying and to understand what the sentiment is and what they're saying about your product, from a pure optimization standpoint, it's about optimizing the perfect page. The other one is search. Why is search a performance metric? There's so much focus on search, right? We have to be in the top 3, we have to be in the top 5. Isn't this something that we're directly influencing? But the fundamental insight here is the search algorithm itself is always, always, always ultimately owned by the retailer. We can do everything we can to influence it, to try and improve our results, but we don't have the ability to directly say to the retailer, I want to be in position 1. There might be sponsored search placements, but there's no retailer that I know of where you can buy your way into those top organic result listings. And so for those reasons, our sphere of influence is the other 5 Ps, and ultimately the results of your efforts manifest in search, and that's why it's a really critical search measurement. So I'm going to leave it there. I just want a quick advertisement here. If you want to dive deeper into the 6 Ps, we've just published our white paper on 6 Ps. There's a short URL here, a bit.ly, that's 6Ps WP white paper, so 6Ps WP, and you can download a copy there and read it at your own leisure. The other thing I just wanted to mention is we've also just recently published an ebook called The Definitive Guide to the Perfect Page. This was it's probably been about 6 to 8 months in development. We partnered with 6 other leaders in the space, and each of them contributed a chapter to the ebook. It's got about 40 pages altogether. Every chapter has a certain topic area, what the problem is, how you can solve for it, and then each provider also included a case study to see a specific example of how it was solved for. So you can download that ebook at bit.ly/Clavis ebook. We hope you will. And we'd love to hear feedback on it as well. If you find value out of it, that's great. And we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.